I have a very particular set of skills, and I'm not afraid to use them. I will find you, and I will kill you. We see each other. You good? The kettle's on.
Gail, hurry up. We're on live.
Oh shit, sorry.
Come on. Oh, Gail, right. Come on. Let's do this.
Come on, right. Hi, everyone. I'm JC. And I'm sure, as you can see today, that Elle is unfortunately not here. I'm sure you saw last week's episode, and unfortunately Elle had been kidnapped from the studio. Men came in with balaclavas on, so I was unable to identify them. And we haven't heard anything from her since. So, on that note, I think we should just get right into the episode and let's pray for Elle. Today, we will be talking about old Hollywood and lavender marriages and what was LGBTQ plus identities like during that time, especially within people in the spotlight. So I think a good basis to start off with would be, we all know Hollywood has always sold romance. It's, come on, especially old Hollywood. Like, are you kidding? Every other movie was some kind of romance trope within it. But for decades, some of its biggest love stories, believe it or not, were completely manufactured. Behind the scenes, there were secret relationships, meaning, real same-sex relationships. And they were hidden from the public for the vast majority of it. There was, intense studio control, as you can imagine. And the film studios managed every point of a young actor or actress's life to, I guess, kind of, once again, fit them into this binary box, I guess you could call it. From who they dated, how they dressed, how they presented themselves. And then there were lavender marriages, which were marriages that were arranged to specifically hide someone's sexuality and, obviously, during those times, protect their career. So, for example, stars like Hudson, who at one point was the ultimate leading man. You'd see him in tons of movies. And then obviously, Greta Garbo, she was famously private, and I'm not sure if you have ever watched Death Becomes Her, but she has been included in that. She went into hiding because she took this eternal life potion, which obviously that's a very camp movie. How can you not love that? And those two people, I guess, became symbols of this hidden world. So I guess now that I've opened you up into what old Hollywood and what we're going to be talking about, I guess the next good question would be is, what was old Hollywood? What actually was it? When people say old Hollywood, blah, 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 it's a specific time period, meaning the golden age. And they're usually talking, roughly from the 1920s to either the mid to late 60s. And it was a time when cinema was booming. Everybody and their mother wanted to be on the silver screen. And obviously, the screens were getting bigger. So the stars had to be bigger than life themselves. But unlike today, actors didn't really have that much freedom, back in that time period. They were signed to long-term studio contracts, which meant studios like MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or Warner Bros. Basically controlled their entire public image. A good person to look at this would be Rita Hayworth, also known as Margarita. Oh no, sorry. Her real name is Margarita Cancino, but she more formally known as within Hollywood as Rita Hayworth. She was a Latina woman, and they completely changed her image to fit, once again, the binary box. They dyed her hair auburn. They lifted her forehead with electrolysis, I think a few inches or a few centimetres, because she had a really low Latin hairline. Like I said, dyed her hair, and they didn't really like her going in the sun that much, because obviously she'd get a gorgeous golden colour, and they wanted her to appear as white as possible. So, like I said, studios carefully crafted personas, deciding who actors dated, what interviews they took. They even controlled how they behaved in public, and I guess they could reprimand them if they were to act out, or if bad publicity, started to become mainstream, I suppose. I guess they just basically controlled their entire image, except for their personal lives behind the screens and once the cameras were switched off. In a lot of ways, stars weren't just people, they were unfortunately products being marketed to audiences. A huge part of the system was something called the Hays Code, and this dictated Hollywood from the 1930s, I'm going to say mid to late 1930s to the late 1960s. And if you don't know what the Hays Code was, the Hays Code was basically a strict set of moral rules, so to speak, that films specifically had to follow. One of the key rules banned was what they called and coined back then sexual perversions, which was a coded way of referring to LGBTQ plus identities, which that doesn't really sound very nice, does it, when you think about it? Sexual perversions, like, I'm not being funny. Yes, I could imagine back then cis straight people were quite possibly the ones who had the more freakier sexual perversions. Excuse me. Anyway, it also enforced very traditional morality. So, for instance, crime couldn't be glorified, although if you look at the genre of noir films, crimes are, committed in those kinds of movies, but it's always that the goodness prevails. There were no unique endings, I suppose, in terms of like today, sometimes movies can end on a bad note. Back then, it would be a case of movies would have to end on and the bad guys were defeated. Whoa, do you get me? Which I guess, you could argue the toss, it was the Great Depression and then World War II, etc. There was multiple things going on, Vietnam, this is throughout the decade. So I guess you could imagine, well, yeah, not many people would have really wanted to watch a depressing movie, JC. Which, don't get me wrong, but sometimes people need to go cry. Come on. And also, in terms of the Hays Code, sex had to be implied rather than shown. Once again, so, for instance, it'd be like a kiss and then it'd kind of fade to a black screen. It wouldn't be as racy as today's movies where, people are, I was going to say half naked, but where people are genuinely getting naked on screen. You know, sometimes less is more. Do you get what I mean? Anyway, I digress. Because the Hays Code was implemented, queer characters were either completely erased, which I think was the main option for studios and people back then, or if they were there, they were turned into stereotypes, so often the villain, or a tragic figure, of course, or as comic relief, which I guess you could say that is quite still, used in movies nowadays. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, you see that overly gay guy, and it's not your typical gay guy that you'd see walking down the street. It's the very much, oh, girl, oh my God, and it's like a character of what a gay person is, I suppose. So in old Hollywood, queer-coded villains became really common. Characters who were portrayed as different or flamboyant or unnatural without ever explicitly being labelled as queer. Potato, kind of thing, guys, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think we'd all love to play a villain every now and then, or, be comic relief, because sometimes comic relief gets the most laughs, I suppose, and the most recognition. And who doesn't love a tragic figure? I mean, I'm kind of debunking everything I'm currently saying. Well, stick with me, you get what I mean. I think we should now talk about queerness behind the curtain. And there's a lot of irony behind it. Even though queer identities were banned on screen, they were everywhere. In every nook and cranny. They were literally everywhere, believe it or not. Many actors, writers and directors were a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Obviously, back then it wasn't the LGBTQ plus. I'm assuming it was just... I actually don't know what it would have been called back then. I guess we shall see after this episode. But unfortunately, those people had to keep it hidden, for protection of themselves, for their career, their studio, their family, their friends, etc. And because obviously they couldn't be public with it, instead they formed private communities, and obviously relationships stayed out of the public eye. Figures like Marlene Dietrich, when she was known as being openly bisexual back then. Well, in her personal life, that is. But for some reason, it wasn't publicly acknowledged in the media, which is surprising, and it's given very much do as I say, not as I do. And then there's Cary Grant, who had close relationships with men, that have led to a lot of speculation about his sexuality. There was a good show on Netflix, I think it was just called Hollywood. I think so. And apparently a lot of the characters in that were curated around actors and actresses during old Hollywood. Oh gosh, it's been so long since I watched it, but it was really good. Really good. Rock Hudson and Cary Grant, supposedly, the two main male characters are based around them. So I'd give it a watch if I was you guys. In many ways, queerness in Hollywood was an open secret. Let's just say that. People within the industry knew. Often knew, but the public image stayed, like I said, very controlled. It was very strict. And now in talking about queerness behind the curtain, I think a good thing to talk about is also lavender marriages. You know, or another coined word, your beard. No, not mine. Oh, I went for laser the other week, so Elle, when we get you back and you watch this video, you cannot clock me. You cannot clock me anymore. No stubble here, mama. She's smooth. She's smooth. This brings us to, like I've just said, lavender marriages or beards now. You know, these marriages were arranged to hide someone's sexuality, usually between like a gay man and a straight woman. That was, you know, very typical. But sometimes it could also be between two queer people, you know, like a gay man or a gay woman. They existed mainly to protect careers, avoid public scandal, and maintain the image that the studios wanted to sell. It was a big cover-up, basically, just to give people, you know, the audiences that were watching and putting a lot of time into old Hollywood. Not putting a lot of time into old Hollywood, but, you know, going to the cinema, you know, getting revenue for these pictures and studios. I guess it was to keep them coming back, in all honesty. And it's a shame, just to imagine of what we could have had on screen back then. You know, a lot of awareness on LGBT identities, and I think it would have been a right fucking rage. It would have been absolutely amazing. Like, can you imagine how camp those, like, certain films would be? Or a leading man falling in love with the waiter. Amazing. Or imagine Now Voyager. Guys, if you haven't watched Now Voyager with Betty Davis in, you should genuinely watch it. Or Roman Holiday, or The Maltese Falcon. I could go on. Love a good black and white movie. I think I should just provide an example very quickly of who was quite possibly in a lavender marriage. And this person would be Rock Hudson, who married his secretary. And the marriage obviously reinforced his image as a straight romantic lead, even though he was supposedly gay. You know, like I said, he'd been seen with quite a few men, not in a scandalous or provocative way, I'm assuming, but enough for people to be like, So, yeah, and God knows who else was in that position of where they had to genuinely have a fake life. And it's sad when you think about it. And now I think a good question to ask is, now are these marriages purely transactional? And I would say in many cases, yeah, you know, they were arranged for publicity and protection. But in some cases, I do believe there was a genuine, like, friendship or a companionship behind it. You know, some people involved supported each other emotionally, I guess. You know, even if the relationship wasn't romantic, I suppose. And I guess if I was back then, I guess I would prefer a lavender marriage where someone knows my tea and it's more of a companionship rather than get the fucking person away from me. You know, I am literally been shoved into a box, yeah? Get this meth away from me. I do not want to touch that, please, madam. So I guess you could say it wasn't always fake in a sense. I guess it was just often complicated, guys, you know. That's the baseline to it. It was complicated. Oh, y'all didn't hear that. I just knocked the mic. You know, across the board, it was complicated and sometimes even, I guess, caring. I guess that's the word you could use. It was just under very unusual circumstances, and I think that's putting it lightly. God knows, you know, the trauma these poor people suffered, you know, having to lie, you know, especially if there wasn't a companionship involved. You know, these poor people must have suffered so much emotional trauma, and we can't forget about the other people as well. You know, the woman or the man that married the queer person, especially if they didn't know. You know, that, just imagine you're head over heels for someone, and the next thing you know, like, oh sweetheart, where are you going? Oh no, I don't know. And then, you know, 'cause a lot of people getting outed back then, and then she gets a friggin' letter or something in the post, or someone knocks on the door and be like, listen girl, I've been sleeping with your husband every fortnight for the past 2 months. You'd be like, excuse me? The fuck? You know? And then that once again goes back to the studios. The studios would be around that like flies on you know what, and more than likely coerce that person to stay into you know, in the marriage. And I guess there was a possibility of, you know, maybe a bribe or something along those lines would have been enforced so that it wouldn't create a scandal. And another great segue. I'm boss at this today, guys, aren't I? I'm just going to segue into one segue into another segue. A good segue would now be the psychological and cultural impact. You know, living like this came with a huge psychological cost, I could imagine. Actors were also under constant pressure to maintain a double life. You know, one public, one private, one with the love of your life, and one potentially with a person you could not give a flying. Oh my God, why am I getting beat up by this mic? You know, and one with a person that unfortunately you couldn't care less about. And I could imagine there was always a fear of being exposed. I'm not being funny. In my younger days, like I'm freaking 40 odd, oh God no, like I'm 70 odd. But when I first came out, and I first wanted to be really private about it. I don't know why. It wasn't like I was ashamed or anything. I think I was just more conscious of what people might say to me. Or how I might be treated. I don't get me wrong, I am 100% sure it was a lot worse back then, you know, the fear of being exposed. But yeah, it's quite a horrible thing to have to live with, you know, the constant pit, you know, deep in your chest of being like, oh my God, you know, you don't know your ass from your elbow kind of thing, and you're like, who, what, where, why, when, you know. It was kind of just like you're waiting, you know. I'm just waiting for the, you know, waiting for the bomb to drop, I suppose. You know, and obviously if that person were exposed, it genuinely could completely destroy their career. And I think this reflects the broader repression of LGBTQ plus people in society during that era. You know, where being openly queer could lead to discrimination, job loss, or God forbid, worse. You know, I can't even fathom potentially how many people's lives were lost during that period because they were open. Don't get me wrong, yeah, it was illegal, it was frowned upon, and people had very strong, more than likely religion-based views upon it. you know, during segregation, you know, black communities were being lynched. So I'm sure LGBT communities, you know, had something of the same effect, which is quite scary to think about. You know, so while audiences saw, you know, glamour and absolute perfection on screen, the reality behind the scenes were often stressful, isolating, and of course, you know, emotionally exhausting. No, ma'am. No. When I first came out, my dad, he was like very much like the men on his side of the family, you know, very opinionated, and very, unfortunately, binary, you know, very traditional men. And I remember the fear of when I first transitioned. My mum was completely fine. Well, she wasn't completely fine. She was like, oh, babe, you know, I'm scared for, yeah, you know, what does this mean? And I guess she was a bit confused herself. I mean, you can't blame any person who has a trans child to be a bit taken aback at first. You know, some people's parents aren't, don't get me wrong. But I used to go to this little group for LGBTQ plus people, and I would go to my nan's dressed as my former self, my masculine self. I would get ready there, get all glammed up, all dolled up, and then get the bus into town and go to my group, spend an hour or two there, have a laugh, and it was amazing. And I couldn't just go straight home after that. I would then have to go back to my nan's, take all my makeup off, put clothes, you know, fold them up or put them in a drawer or wash them or whatever, get dressed and then go back home, in fear of my dad seeing me like that. And him having a go at me mum or having a go at me. And it was quite a scary, you know, not scary, that's me being a bit dramatic, but it was a really anxiety and emotionally exhausting time period of my life, and living a double life, so to speak. I tell you, Rukuma, you could not pay me enough money to live like that again. And if anyone who's listening that is currently living a double life in terms of their gender or sexual orientation, etc., it is not worth it. Oh my God, you will be so drained when you finally basically face the music and start living as yourself. You'll just be drained. You'll be like, where do I go from here? But I know it's easier said than done. You know, there's extenuating circumstances behind certain things, you know, as to why people can't do it, like I've just explained mine. But I did break those walls down eventually, and here I am today. My hair might be a little bit ski whiff, but I look gorge, and you aren't telling me otherwise. Once again, another great segue, JCL. Thank you, JCL. I know. Born to do it, guys. Let's talk about breaking the system. So by the 1960s, things started to change. The Hays Code began to decline as social attitudes shifted and filmmakers pushed back against censorship. You know, after roughly 3 decades of being looked at under a friggin' magnifying glass and having the entirety of what you do whilst at work being scrutinised. I'd be like, you, my friends, can get frigged. You know, and the 60s were also a time of major cultural movements. You know, we've got civil rights, feminism, and early LGBTQ plus rights movements, you know, all of which challenged traditional norms and got people to open their eyes and be like, oh, there is a bigger picture out here, you know, it's not just black and white, there's a whole spectrum of colours, you know. I guess you could also say it's like water. If you know, you know. You know, and as a result, films slowly became more open and complex, you know, and the strict control of the studio system began to weaken, you know, after its death choke. What is it? Like a death grip on it for so many years. And this marked the beginning of a more modern Hollywood where representation, while still imperfect, it started to improve. It started to improve. And I think a good thing to do now would be a comparison. So, how does old Hollywood compare to today? You know, in my opinion, there's definitely more visibility now. You know, many actors are openly LGBTQ+, and queer stories are more common in film and TV, you know. Like, I believe it's called, is it Heartbreaker? I think so. You know, Sex Education. The list goes on and on and on. Thankfully, you know, it's boomed, I guess you could say, but with the current climate, I don't want to jinx anything. But a lavender marriage is still a thing. I don't think so. Not like I don't know, I've asked myself a question. Hello? In my opinion, I don't think it'd be in the same formal way, but I guess they're more called like PR relationships now, you know, instead of a lavender marriage or, you know, good publicity, bad publicity. It's all like PR stunts and PR relationships and, you know, and all that jazz. And, you know, a PR relationship is basically the same as studio control, I guess, where couples date publicly to shape their image and curate what I guess they want their future to look like. A bit deranged if you'd ask me. You know, so while things have improved, the idea of managing celebrity image, I think that's the right way I'd say it, hasn't completely disappeared. It's just evolved, you know. It's like water. It starts off as a lake, and then over time, erosion, and turns into an ocean. Okay. So on a closer note, old Hollywood wasn't just about glamour. It was about survival in certain cases and certain circumstances. You know, behind the perfect lighting and the iconic performances of that decade, people were navigating a system that forced them to hide who and what they were. And if you look at the media nowadays, it's scary how much control the media still have over LGBTQ+ identities, you know. It's quite scary, and I believe telling these stories matters, you know, because it helps us understand that not just film history, but the real lives behind it, and why visibility and representation today are so important, because there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people back then who were unable to live a happy life. And, you know, that's all, I guess, we want. And what they wanted, you know, was to lead happy, normal, whatever normal is, lives. And unfortunately, that was taken away from them. in a time when there was quite literally a dictator in Germany. Not being funny, I think yous have got bigger fish to fry rather than two men being with one another, or someone wanting to be trans. Do you get where I'm coming from? It's like, get a grip. On a final note, there's one question I want to ask you guys, and I would love it if you could leave it in the comments. Do you think Hollywood is truly more open today, or are some things just hidden in different ways? I think that's a very, very good question to end on. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it, guys. It's been a very short episode today, and that's because it is quite literally 34 minutes past 8 at night. It's been a bit of a rush. I was supposed to be filming tomorrow, but it's all booked tomorrow, so it was a very impromptu thing. My recommendations, though, for some old Hollywood movies, if y'all are interested, it would be Now Voyager, Gilda, The Maltese Falcon, Dial M for Murder, or Grace Kelly. Just know Grace Kelly, you should do. High Society. Oh my god, there's so many that I'm literally forgetting. It's a hate crime. It truly is. Oh my god, I can't remember. Guys, breaking news. They found Elle. Okay, we're going to cut to breaking news now. They've released video footage of Elle, and by the looks of it, it seems to be ransom footage. I'll play the tape now.
Help. I'm still taken. I've been here a week. Help. Please. He's asking for $1 million hairs. Otherwise, he's gonna make me go. He's not giving me hormones. He said he'll make me detransition. Help. Meet him across the beach with $1 million hairs, no less, no more. Otherwise... Oh my god, can you not tie these any tighter? Jesus fucking Christ. I could easily get out of these. See? Jesus, you just can't get kidnapped anymore. You're an absolute dickhead. If you're going to tie me up, at least try and do it correctly. Don't be looking at me like... Literally, pay the guy $1 million because I'm about to absolutely hit him. He is absolutely driving me insane. I do not know what you look like under that ski mask, but Jesus fucking Christ, help. Because I'm going to go insane. What now?
She's being held ransom for $1 million. Elle, I promise you, we will get you back. We will get you back. I will set up a GoFundMe for $1 million hairs. Thank you. At least we know she's alive and she's safe. We will get you back, Elle. We will. I assure you. I have a very particular set of skills, and I'm not afraid to use them. I will find you, and I will kill you. We see each other. You good? So, on a closing note, guys, trust and believe this will be dealt with. And as usual, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's been a pleasure making this video. And I guess you will see me next week. Or quite possibly, I might be bald. But you might see Elle here. From that video, though, she looks like she's giving them a bit of lip at the end. Don't know about you, but giving her a run for the money. I digress. So thank you once again for the love and support that you've shown us these past 2 months. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I love you all. And please say a prayer for Elle. Yeah, I love you very much. And I will see you next week. Bye! The kettle's on.
Gail, hurry up. We're on live.
Oh shit, sorry.
Come on. Oh, Gail, right. Come on. Let's do this.
Come on, right.